So, when I was looking at the lesson in the gospel for today, um, the part that was the most confusing for me was the bit where it mentions, make sure I get this right. The soul is in a watery form. That's how the gospel starts, and it took me a while, but I finally realized that at least on one level, biologically, we are mostly made of water. But I also thought that was an interesting way to put it. And so I also realized that there's an extra layer, at least one extra layer, uh, of like a lot of times in tarot and divination and that sort of thing, water represents emotions. And I think the turmoil of the different emotions that causes the soul to, you know, go from good to evil and back and forth, and then ultimately you need help from Jesus who comes and you know gives her all of the mysteries and all of that. It 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 feels very synchronicitous. Um, because the other thing I was thinking about was the lesson reminds me a lot of a couple of different uh, passages. One of which is in Paul to one of in one of his letters. I don't remember which one. Um, he talks about the things that I want to do are the things that I don't do. The things I don't want to do, those are the things that I end up doing. And it, that is both the conundrum of life and also the solution to which is wisdom or Sophia and following her footsteps. And like in the gospel where it talks about taking on the her yoke and her fetters and all of these like heavy burdensome things that end up transforming into joy. um, at first, when you're following this path that she's laid out, it feels like a burden because it feels like you're narrowing. At least to me, it does. Like you're narrowing your choices because I tend to want to leave all of my options open as a rule, which doesn't always serve me, which is why I ended up doing the things that I don't want to do and vice versa. Um, but eventually, once you get far enough on the path, and you follow, those who have gone before you, who have already gained some wisdom, um, then what was a yoke ends up being a joy because the path she's leading you on is for your own best good and for your own highest of lights. It's like I would imagine like parenting a kid, not that I have any, but the kids don't want to do the things you want them to do all the time, but eventually, teaching them to pick up after themselves, even though they don't want to put away their toys or whatever, like it ends up being a good habit in the long run. Um, and I think some of that stuff is what the lesson was talking about as well. Um, yeah, the last thing I wanted to bring up in regards to all of this is that because this life is full of dualities and gray areas and a lot of things are not always clear. um you know a lot of times you need the descent in order to ascend into a higher place. It's kind of like the calendar year in itself, um where it always seemed contradictory to me that you've got the dark part of the year and you've got the light part of the year, but half of the light part of the year it's actually getting darker, and half of the light and the dark part of the year it's getting lighter. And so one way, half the year is light and dark, but if you actually look at the ramping up and the ramping down, it's basically half of each is light and dark. um, and I feel like that's a metaphor for life where sometimes it seems like you're in darkness, but you're actually ascending into the light. And sometimes when you're when it feels like you're in the light, you're actually descending into darkness. And that's where, the help of, like the gospel says, of people who are, people who you recognize as being wise and learned and, you know, having gone the path that you're treading in the moment can help you navigate some of that. And also, taking on the fetters that turn into the joy of Sophia as well can help you navigate the weirdness that is human existence. Um, and so, with that, go in peace, and may the lady walk with thee. Amen.